Ben, welcome.
Yeah,
Good to see you.
yeah, good to see you too, Daniel. It's been a while since the summit in 2019.
2019. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
we've been busy raising our kids.
that's that's right. It's right. There's a lot to life these days for sure. Family's important.
Yeah, and the other thing, it's just such a cheesy segue. The other thing that's important is this thing that you're working on right now. I reached out to you because I saw that you're doing uh, a program on tapering antidepressants,
Right,
and I get calls weekly,
right.
definitely monthly, a couple of times a month, about people who, want to do plant medicine of one kind or another, um, and feel like they can't because they're on antidepressants of some kind, and and some of them don't even know. Like some of them want to do the work, and I start talking to them, and of course, one of the questions I ask them is, are you on any medication? And they are, and I bring up this idea of tapering, and it almost seems insurmountable to people. Um,
Yeah,
and I sometimes worry that are, people don't know that they have to, and they're mixing it. Or some people want to, but they feel like it would be hard or scary or dangerous for them to taper off.
yeah,
And I'm, constantly saying, oh, well, go read the Spirit Pharmacist's website. And so I just figured we could have a chat about it. We could have a chat
yeah,
about this course that you have. You have.
yeah. So, right, like just some background, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I started a consulting practice around psychotropics or traditional medications to treat mental illness and psychedelics a couple of years ago now. And so I've really been seeing people that have these types of questions and are essentially interested in finding the information that they'll need to sort of make a safe plan, feel empowered, know what they're doing as they kind of make this transition between the world of traditional treatments for mental health and psychedelic assisted psychotherapies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then antidepressants, particularly, right? Like why antidepressants out of all the types of drugs for mental illness that you could pick to make a course out of with psychedelics. And it's really because it seems that these two drug classes are going to be kind of pitted against each other in the marketplace eventually, and that they're not really very compatible with each other. So most types of psychotropics are available antidepressants. The different types of classes of them are actually sort of almost built to be combined. Like, for example, it's really common to see people taking SSRIs along with another antidepressant like bupropion or Wellbutrin that works through a different type of mechanism. So this was like one thing that it just seemed like it's a real black box for a lot of people as far as moving into psychedelic therapies from a world of traditional antidepressants. But then the more I looked, because I was getting questions about this, it's actually kind of almost equally a black box as far as how to successfully and safely taper antidepressants. It
Mm-hmm.
really seemed that the recommendations coming from professional organizations and the manufacturers, kind of this taper off slowly over 2 to 4 weeks, was practically intolerable for a large majority of people taking antidepressants. And the manufacturer advice is essentially, well, ask your doctor how to do it, yet they never really carried out sufficient types of studies for doctors to understand or know how to do it either. So
Right.
in the last year and a half or so, this attention has been kind of, or this issue has been kind of picked up in medical literature more and more, as it just becomes so widely reported that many people are having a really hard time tapering and stopping traditional antidepressants. And traditional antidepressants are not the types of drugs that are classically thought of as having a strong physical dependence or,
Mm-hmm.
or addictive type of quality to them. but it's really evident at this point that the withdrawal reactions, the rebound symptoms, potentially return of original illness, many antidepressants actually don't work that great. So the person's in a position where they're not feeling that well, taking a medication that isn't really helping, yet trying to step down off that medication is also going to exacerbate things with this kind of withdrawal syndrome. So it can be a really precarious position for some people to be in. And as quite frankly, like interest in using these psychedelic therapies explodes, and more people that are being treated with antidepressants for conditions like depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, eating disorders, essentially all the things that psychedelics are being studied for or are planned to be studied for in the near future. Antidepressants are sort of the first line psychiatric medications for those conditions. So it's going to be something that clinicians are thinking about. And I think, right, like people in your position that are in integration networks or other places where people have a lot of questions about psychedelic therapies, really kind of thematically keep telling me that this has been something that's an issue. So
I often
just
feel
wanted to,
I almost feel, I hear people almost jokingly, I mean, it's not funny, but they feel like their antidepressants are like a life sentence, is the word that I hear from sometimes, that they feel like they were taught that, oh, you're just going to be on this forever now. Like, this is just the way it's going to be. And, this idea of tapering, it almost makes the, I have an ever so slight conspiracy mindset. It's not big,
sure, yeah,
but slight, that it's almost like, the amount of information around tapering is almost because they're like, we'll just stay on it.
right.
It's like the idea of getting off of it for any number of reasons, including wanting to do psychedelics, is incomprehensible.
Yeah, it is true. It's kind of weirdly true that the drugs are slow movers, right? The antidepressants, the standard counseling is kind of like, well, it takes 4 to 6 weeks to work. Once you feel better, if you feel better, you're supposed to continue it for, at least 6 to 9 months. So essentially the course of therapy recommended is a course of therapy that's going to lead to some type of physical dependence. But you're correct in that not just the number of antidepressant users, but the number of long-term antidepressant users has been steadily increasing. And it's, part of the sort of larger, call it like pharmacovigilance types of studies that they detected this as a problem, is that, hey, these drugs, were designed to be used for, 12, maybe 24 months at a time. But major depressive disorder is episodic. People have major depressive episodes, and many of the anxiety disorders are similar in that the illnesses sort of wax and wane over the people's lifetimes, depending on what type of circumstances or stressors or things are happening with them. And this idea of chronic antidepressant therapy and the number of long-term users, when they ask people like, why are you not stopping? Essentially, it's fear of withdrawal and feeling like they don't have any support to do it, which is something that, hopefully this course would be a resource that would kind of chip away at some of those barriers for people.
I would love to talk about potential withdrawal symptoms, but before I do that, I'd perhaps, can we touch on why you shouldn't do both at once? Like, why can't I take Wellbutrin and psilocybin at the same time?
Well, Wellbutrin and psilocybin you might be able to because it works on dopamine and norepinephrine rather than serotonin.
All right, so it shows how much I know. I don't really know one from another.
There's a lot of them out there, and even beyond this course, I have a blog about antidepressants and psychedelics on my website, and there's an interaction table that you can download there that really kind of cross sections all of the antidepressants for the most commonly used types of psychedelics, because it does get confusing because there's just so many of them. I would say, like, in a nutshell, like the two big reasons why you may not want to combine an antidepressant and a psychedelic would essentially be, potential for loss of effect or loss of subjective effect of a psychedelic. There's some combinations that do that,
Mm,
or essentially a physical danger. And it really depends on the type of psychedelic you're talking about. If you're talking about physical danger, the ones that really come to mind primarily is something like ayahuasca that has monoamine oxidase inhibitors in it, or
hmm.
ibogaine, where there's like real drug interactions and potential for cardiac arrhythmias and cardiac toxicities. There's a lot of talk about the potential for serotonin syndrome, but that
That's what
is
I hear
really
getting bounced around a lot.
a combination sensitive type of phenomenon. And if you're talking about SSRIs and psilocybin mushrooms, or SSRIs and regular doses of MDMA, there's just really not very much supporting that type of thing does lead to a physical toxicity that's serious. And it is much more reported that, well, the psychedelic experience was just completely flat, like almost nothing happened, or it was so, you know, not mystical compared to what
Right.
everyone else around me was experiencing. Or, yeah.
Right. I do hear from time to time um, people who report no effect whatsoever, and they're not on.
Yeah.
And sometimes they wonder if it's because they used to take things in the past. They used to take antidepressants in the past, and they wonder if that creates some sort of blockage that's long term. Are you aware of anything like that?
Yeah. So there are some anecdotal cases like that. And the MDMA or psilocybin assisted psychotherapy trials have required people to discontinue and wash out their antidepressants for at least 2 weeks before
Mm-hmm.
using a psychedelic. But that amount of time pretty much guarantees that the medication is gone from the system plus some. Um, it really only takes like 7 or 8 days for the drugs to wash out most of the antidepressants, but they kind of give an extra, 4 or 5 days for their 2 weeks there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not really known that that's like the optimal amount of time to wash out. And kind of thinking back to earlier in the conversation, we're saying, well, when you start an antidepressant, the counseling is it takes 4 to 6 weeks to really take effect, because you're waiting for some type of neuroadaptation event to happen, rather than, okay, I blocked the serotonin reuptake pump and it was like flipping a switch, and my mood is improved or my anxiety is reduced like the very next day,
Mm-hmm.
or like a psychedelic within a period of hours. So psychedelics are rapid acting. That's one of the big pluses compared to standard antidepressants. But kind of going back to your question, on the flip side of things, if you're thinking, well, I was waiting for this neuroadaptation event to occur to feel better. Gosh, maybe I'm also waiting for some type of reverse neuroadaptation event to occur when stopping them. Um, I think I've also met people that have reported feeling almost nothing when they didn't even have a history of taking antidepressants as well, though. So there's a lot to be discovered, I think, in this area as far as like what the optimal time frame is.
Mm-hmm.
But in the course, I give you what I've accumulated from pretty meticulous literature searches, as well as the last kind of couple of years of just working with people. Yeah.
Right. And so, what are some of like the challenges? Like why is it difficult, and what are some of the challenges?
Yeah, well, I mean, probably like one question, right, is like, well, was the antidepressant working that well to begin with?
Mm,
Because I think for people that try an antidepressant and it works wonderfully, and they take it for the recommended period of time, like many of them can kind of safely taper off. But I think a lot of people kind of get into this rock and a hard place type of situation where they're taking the medications and there's a true type of physical dependence to it, but it didn't really make them feel better, or made them feel better for some period of time, but then they had to increase the dose. And then some period of time again, they had to increase the dose. And now they're on a rather high dose and they're not feeling that well. So I think that some people get kind of deep into the therapy as far as like the dose that they're taking and the amount of time that they've taken it. And, you know, part of that is just, well, it's part of the recommended course of therapy. But it also seems that, you know, one factor is that the medications, the strengths that are available may not really have the type of nuanced strengths that people really need to be able to step down in a way that is not going to cause some type of significant withdrawal reaction. So if you're on, you know, Lexapro 20 milligrams, you know, I guess that's a bad example because you can cut them and things like that. But certain ones, Effexor or venlafaxine, you know, it's only available in capsules that are extended release pretty much, and you can't crush or chew those. And the step downs are so large for people that they do run into problems. So some of it's agent specific, you know, some of it's person specific. You know, like antidepressants treat major depression, and that's why they're called antidepressants. But they're also used for people with panic disorders. So, you know, they can have rebound symptoms, which is sort of defined as when you stop or step down a dose, you're almost immediately encountered with symptoms that are similar to what you experienced at baseline, except for in an even more intense kind of way. So if you're already experiencing panic attacks, now you're going to get some rebound panic. It can just be so distressing and debilitating that you're kind of trapped or stuck. That and exactly like a lot of the time, if you go to the literature, it's sort of like, what do you do when someone's having a bad withdrawal reaction? Well, you put them back up on their dose. Is essentially what everything says. There's you know, not much in there that kind of like I think tells people, even medical professionals, sort of like, well, what would you do for that type of person, or how can you help them with that type of situation.
I really love this idea of nuance. You're talking about how that the tapering process sort of deserves more granularity and nuance and care than is available systemically. You know, you're talking about these capsules, and there's not a lot to be done there. That is a shame. Are there like other sorts of ways to sort of support without to support that lack of nuance by creating it somehow in lifestyle or diet or other practical ways?
Yeah, precisely. Because you know, I mean, some people, you know, are very sensitive to withdrawal. You know, the most common story I get though is kind of like, you know, I tried tapering off once and it was just awful. I couldn't handle it. Like, well, what did you do? I cut the dose in half, and then I waited a week, and then I tried to reduce it again, and then on day 10 I just kind of like fell apart. So it's like, truly they're probably following the standard recommendations for tapering. They waited a week and they decreased the dose. But you know, if you're already sort of experiencing something at a week, you know, it's probably too soon to go down. And maybe that initial dose decrease of 50% was also just too steep to begin with. So I think that because they're slow movers and you're sort of waiting weeks for responses to fully occur when you change the dose, having a taper regimen that tapers on a weekly basis for the drug is probably going to present the person with a compounded withdrawal as things sort of progress and move through it. So
what's a compounded withdrawal?
Like let's say you decrease the dose 25% and you get a mild withdrawal, and that withdrawal reaction, you know, maybe it's kind of yucky for a couple of weeks and then it's better, but it doesn't really fully resolve until 4 weeks. And so you're stepping down the dose and maybe needing to wait 4 weeks for that kind of for you to know where you're sitting after that dose reduction. Yet the advice would be to decrease it again 1 to 2 weeks later. So essentially you start stacking these withdrawal effects on top of each other because you're decreasing the dose faster than it takes, than the person can adapt to the dose decrease. It's also true that some of these antidepressants have minimum therapeutic doses, and it seems like around the minimum therapeutic dose, things get more challenging for people to taper off. And typically the most difficult step of all is going from some drug to no drug. So tapers may need to be slowed down as they go. Maybe you can start with a 25 or 50% decrease in someone that's not that sensitive, but after that, you may still need to slow down a little bit as you get closer to the end. And essentially, it's about getting the person to know what happens, because it's so individual. It's like, I don't know if you're going to be sensitive to this type of thing. Some people can follow the standard advice and taper off of it and don't even notice a difference the entire time. Like I've talked to people that happens, right? So, okay, I know I'm sensitive, right? Well, how sensitive are you? When does that withdrawal reaction peak? What can you do to plan for that? If you know that, well, days 5 through 8 are the worst for me, and I'm difficult to be around that day, well, maybe you can time it so that's over a long weekend, and prep your partner that you're likely to be really going through something that weekend, and arrange for a session with your therapist on that Friday afternoon to check in and make sure that you have an outlet to just spill some toxic stuff that wants to come out of you at that point in time, and essentially get to know what's going to happen when you step down the dose, and then get to thinking about what other interventions and plans can I make to support myself in that process.
I'm glad that you mentioned the therapist, just because we were talking about liability and disclaimer before this went on. And, I do want to tag that, we're not telling anybody what to do. That hopefully they have a good relationship with a skilled therapist who's going to support them in this process.
Yeah. So, right. Like the course is not for the person to then just take everything into their own hands and decide, I'm going to taper off and I have all the information I need from this course, so, just leave my medical team behind. No, it's like, well, they know you best and they're prescribing, right? So they're supposed to be supervising this process. And, really part of the course is, step one is finding a supportive prescriber that will support you in the tapering process, and having a discussion about your goals and why you want to taper in the first place, and have them be a sounding board for those types of ideas. Really, the whole premise of everything is that your course with antidepressants is individual, and there may be some people where they get significant benefit out of the drugs, and they have severe symptoms, and they've tried doing something else 2 or 3 times in their life, and it's always just ended not so well for them. And that it's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with taking an antidepressant to help you with your mood or anxiety when they help you. I think that what I was realizing is that for many people, it's just not helping them in the way that they were hoping to. And then, exactly like we've been talking about, they feel kind of stuck with it, and there's just an information void there. So it's mostly about providing a resource for this information void. And, it could be for a person taking antidepressants, right? It could be for therapists that maybe provide more talk therapy or emotional support and work with people taking antidepressants all day long, but don't necessarily prescribe them themselves. And, more than half of the antidepressants prescribed, and by the way, over 10% of the US adult population is taking antidepressants. So there's a lot of them prescribed. Over half of them prescribed are coming from primary care. And again, there's nothing wrong with a primary care doctor prescribing an antidepressant and helping you, but they may not have the same sorts of specialization in mental health or understanding of antidepressants that a psychiatrist would. And may need more information themselves about this tapering process. So I think that the course can appeal to a variety of people, and it's really just about giving information that's empowering rather than telling anyone what to do.
Right. Now, are you finding that this information is also of interest to people like primary care physicians? Are you talking to a lot of doctors about this kind of thing?
Yeah, so that's probably a prong of the operation that
Mm-hmm.
I will say yes, right? So through psychedelic school where this course is offered, antidepressants and psychedelics, a course in antidepressant tapering and for psychedelic therapies. This one I think I made again, like I really think the providers could get value out of it. Like I got the information from medical literature and assembled it in a way that I think they can get something out of it. But I was really targeting almost the antidepressant users themselves or auxiliary types of mental health professionals that aren't prescribers but really do a lot of work with people taking antidepressants. Um, I think that those are great audiences. I've been working in academia now for almost the last 5 years. So I'd say like
Mm-hmm.
the things where I like target, I wouldn't say I target doctors so much, but more practicing pharmacists. So I kind of try more for like continuing education programs through the professional meetings or outlets where you really have their ear, and particularly when there's the CE involved, they tend to be responsive. But I have not put together a specific program, I guess a CE program for them on what I found about antidepressant tapering. But if I was to do it, I would be heavily reliant on the references that I used to put together this course.
Mm-hmm. This is all really I'm just starting to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's having to do this.
Yeah.
And it was, I tried antidepressants when I was very young, like at 13 or something like that. And I guess they were fine for a bit. And then I'm also thinking about, I even just taking 5-HTP, I'm very sensitive to stuff. Even, I took 5-HTP for a while. Tapering off of that was hard for me.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, I can only imagine, something more powerful than an over the counter kind of thing is like can really, really be tough for folks.
Yeah.
And so this seems, I mean, is that abnormal to feel such an effect from 5-HTP that it's you almost like really
I haven't
want it?
really heard of people withdrawing from 5-HTP, but yeah, I think you're just kind of like onto something in that, there's so much discussion about, well, emotional support for psychedelic experiences and after psychedelic
Mm-hmm.
experiences for, the people's process as they unfold. But if you're starting this process from tapering an antidepressant and moving towards a psychedelic therapy,
Mm-hmm.
your process starts the moment you decide that you're heading in that direction, and the emotions that can come up and the things that you have to go through could be very challenging. And perhaps unlike a psychedelic experience, there's very little promise of mystical or like pleasant effects in that type of process. It's mostly going to be dysphoric things and challenging emotions. So I just think really in all of this, in psychedelic assisted psychotherapies, in integration provider networks, just in the psychedelic community, um, you know, you know, tread carefully with some of these people. They are sensitive. If they tell you they're scared of tapering their antidepressant, that should be a red flag that they probably are sensitive and probably
Mm-hmm.
need some more planning and resources and support. And some of that you may be able to offer them, right, as far as the emotional support in that process. And some of it might be right about just getting them to plan this thing out and take their time. I know Michael Pollan's book was extremely exciting,
Mm-hmm.
but if you've been taking antidepressants for 5, 6, 10, 15 years, you know, to think that in 15 days it would be a good time to start the psychedelic therapy. you may need to wait longer and plan something.
I mean, I think that it's really a good call to respect people's emotions and where they're at. There can be, this excitement or this glamour of, an experience, or a glamour of having a new life or something like that, that can get us to ignore our internal life. That if it's in a state of turmoil to begin with, we probably want to be careful and gentle. And as support providers, all the more so, right? There can be there can be sort of the glamour or the addiction to results of like, of getting across the finish line and of having quantitative success. Like, they did this, this happened, and this happened, but it is kind of at what cost? It's like how do we nurture people into an experience as opposed to sort of like get them over the finish line of one.
Yeah, and I mean let's just say that the experience itself is safe and effective despite kind of rushing into things. Well, where's the person going to land on the backside? They're supposed to be integrating from this big experience they had, but they're still in the throes of a withdrawal syndrome, right? It's kind of like, so maybe they're going to falsely conclude that it made them feel worse, something like that, because you've just got a couple different cooks in the kitchen making different things at the same time. Then again, waiting forever can, there's pretty real risks of their original symptoms coming back, because the antidepressants decrease the symptoms and make you more functional. That's a good thing. For many people, but they don't really cure or fully heal mental illnesses most of the time. So there's that to kind of consider. So it is a very individual thing, both when and if you're going to try a psychedelic therapy, and how you're going to taper off of your antidepressant, particularly if you're sensitive. Again, some people aren't, so it's not as big of a deal.
Yeah, it's an interesting to ride the line between doing it all at once and doing nothing.
Yeah.
And to kind of know which way you tend to in any given moment. Like, what it reminds me of my old yoga days, when you'd have a classroom full of people and half of them would be like overexerting, and then half of them would be sort of just lounging. And you want to tell these people to back off, and they don't hear you, but the other people do more.
Yeah.
You want to tell people to strive harder, and those people don't hear you, but the other ones do. And so kind of getting everybody to find, to try new things, basically, to try new things to get new results, I think is kind of what we're talking about, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, you're right. That's the whole, it's like, well, you said you're thinking of trying a psychedelic therapy, and or you wanted to taper off your antidepressant, so you knew that was going to be work, right? But how to give the work in a way that it isn't completely overwhelming for the person and result in some type of crisis or nervous breakdown, essentially. Right. How to kind of navigate the whole space or terrain there is going to be a real thing. It already is a real thing, but it's going more. I mean, MDMA or psilocybin being approved, will officially be a real thing in medicine that requires providers to understand how to sort of address or transition people as they kind of want to do that, because they're treatment resistant. They've tried a couple of antidepressants, they've given it an adequate trial and an adequate dose, and it just hasn't brought them the results that they're looking for. And that's exactly where these types of psychedelic therapies seem like they're going to be indicated, at least right now. That's how they're being studied for treatment resistant types of illnesses, which are defined by being resistant to antidepressants.
Yeah. I mean, you're making me think of another paradox. You're talking about how it's work. And, on one hand, we all have to do our own work. Nobody can do our work for us. But at the same time, we don't have to do it alone.
Right.
Having, support networks, like ours, like yours, like mine, like the myriad of other ones out there, so key, provided that we're still doing our own work.
Yeah. Yeah. And work doesn't have to be unenjoyable, and work doesn't mean that you're doing something by yourself, right? Like work could be going through the course and just learning a lot more about what you're up against.
Right.
Work could be arranging a team of people that you really want to work with, and are not afraid to put your heart on your sleeve too.
Mm-hmm.
Like arranging your life in a way that you're more supported, and you're more connected, and you have more information and resources. All of that planning, I mean, that's the work that you need to pave the way to success. And then, actually, you may not find yourself with your back breaking as you're trying to do all this heavy lifting later on, because
Right.
you did some kind of pre-work, I guess.
There's no such thing as too much preparation. That's what my daddy always used to say.
Yeah, well, fair enough. At some point, you gotta go for it, I think. But yeah,
yes,
you don't really want to. I've been reading the Art of War lately, and that's one thing they talk about is essentially, you never go into battle unless you've already won.
mm-hmm.
You're prepared in a way that you've already won, and
Yes.
The battle is just a symbolic thing, really.
Mm.
Kind of just like, right. So it's sort of the best, instead of going to fight something, it's much better to just prepare the crap out of it, and that way, there'll be a whole lot less resistance at the end of the day.
Hanuman did that too. In the Ramayana, Hanuman was tasked with helping to find the Princess Sita, and he sat in meditation and found her in his meditation, and successfully performed his mission while he was still sitting cross-legged, and then he got up and he did it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming and talking to me about this.
No, in fact, yeah, this is definitely a pretty cool and promptly type of conversation, but yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and so people can find your class. The link will be, below, and you can find the link on Psychedelic School, and I'm sure people can shoot you emails to talk more about it. They can shoot me emails. I don't even know what Wellbutrin does, so my knowledge on that level is limited, but I'm happy to help support you as you go into war.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So it's like it's slightly confusing, I guess, because the course is offered through Psychedelic School or psychedelicschool.com, but maybe I'm more known right now as the Spirit Pharmacist, or having my kind of blog materials and things and consulting practice at spiritpharmacist.com. So I guess you're going to have to check out both of the links, but the course is at the Psychedelic School one.
Well, the thing, you're in luck because the people who watch my stuff are brilliant. They won't be confused by the small. They won't be confused by these little details. Just hone right in.
Right on. Cool, thanks, man. Daniel. Thanks so much for the time, and I'm looking forward to working with you more.
Yeah, for sure. I will, see you around the virtual campus. Give my love to your wife and your daughter.
Yeah, same to yours and River.
Awesome. Be well.
Cheers.